So the Exorcist Trilogy. Oh. Okay, look, I'll tell you what we know, and then I'll go on a tear. The New York Times has reported that Universal Pictures has closed a $400 million plus deal for a new Exorcist trilogy. Sources are saying this is in the same ballpark as Netflix's deal for Knives Out movies that cost $465 million. By the way, the original Exorcist made $400 million or something, $401 million in its original run. So I don't know where they got this number from. This deal is for a new trilogy of films, with the first to get a theatrical release, while the next two sequels could debut on Universal's streaming service Peacock, which a lot of people have already written off as underperforming and not having a lot of content, and certainly not a lot of premiere movies. So obviously they're trying to change that. As for the cast, Ellen Burstyn will return for the series. She's never come back. Linda Blair has come back for the character of Regan before. But she has said she has not been contacted about this at all. So it'll be interesting to see if she does at some point join. It kind of feels like she would be the bigger deal than Ellen Burstyn, even though Ellen Burstyn is an outstanding actress. But she is going to return. She is, of course, the mother to Linda Blair's Regan, who is possessed by a demon. Leslie Odom Jr., known for his roles in Hamilton and One Night in Miami, will star as the father of a possessed child who, desperate for help, tracks down Mrs. Burstyn's character, Chris MacNeil. David Gordon Green, who ushered the Halloween franchise back to the big screen in 2018, with a sequel set for this year and next year, is going to write the screenplay and direct for this new trilogy. Blumhouse, who also produced the Halloween series, are going to produce the series. It's also this is very much like what Netflix do, evidently with the Knives Out deal. And a lot of streamers are throwing money at IPs, hoping for big returns, and risking a lot doing it. Let's talk about why this is a terrible idea. Like I said, I went through Paramount Plus's library a couple of episodes back. I talked about what they have, and how they were basically just grabbing at every IP they had. Universal, for whatever reason, grasped at all their IPs, and they landed on The Exorcist. By the time this comes out, The Exorcist will be 50 years old. Ellen Burstyn will be 90. I love Ellen Burstyn. She is an excellent actress. She has done some of my favourite roles of all time, including The Exorcist, but also Requiem for a Dream and many, many more. She's not a big enough deal or a name or a memorable enough character even, I would argue, to be relevant. Even from a storytelling perspective, the character that you would want back would be Jason Miller's father, Karras, but of course he's passed on. Max von Sydow passed on recently. That's another character that would make more sense. And I'm saying this because you cannot do what you did with Halloween with this series. Because Halloween, at its very, very basic, the kernel of that idea is just a slasher. That's crowd friendly. That works. The Exorcist, though, it's not. I actually did a video on this last October, if you want to check it out. I'll upon further review The Exorcist. Talking about how people consider it the scariest movie of all time. And how that can be the case then, and how it cannot necessarily be the case now. I loved The Exorcist. It was my first time seeing it when I did that video. And I think it is a mastercraft in cinema, especially in horror. But it also hasn't really had the staying power. There's a common trope we hear, especially about television. And the trope is called Seinfeld isn't funny. Okay? And the reason I bring that up is because the idea behind that trope is that people see Seinfeld years later after seeing all these sitcoms, and they're like, this isn't funny. I've seen this here, this here, this here. In other words, the idea being that Seinfeld created and started all these ideas, and other shows took from them, to the point that the original doesn't feel important. Do you see what I'm saying with The Exorcist? Every shitty horror film since The Exorcist has probably incorporated exorcism in it. So the idea now is a bit naff. We don't really care about exorcism anymore. They're not as scary as they used to be. It doesn't help that basically every exorcism film since has been not very good. And the thing is as well, Universal has the right to the Conjuring franchise, and that feels more modern, more relevant, whether you like them or not. That's kind of where their money is. So throwing $400+ million, that is an insane amount of money, at the Exorcist IP, hoping it's going to draw people in, is ludicrous. If it's a good film, people are going to watch it, sure. But there isn't that sense of nostalgia that there is with other franchises. And one of the other reasons I mentioned Halloween is because Halloween Whether you like those sequels or not, they kept making them. So it's had staying power. I don't think there's ever been more than like 11 years since a Halloween sequel. Okay? It has staying power. It has cultural relevance. Every generation grew up with it. And they all could identify with at least the character of Laurie Strode because she was popping up in the series intermittently. Whether you saw the original, whether you saw H2O, whether you saw whatever. And the reason I bring that up is because The Exorcist has 5 sort of sequels. Okay, they had The Exorcist, classic, amazing. They had The Heretic, no one liked it, didn't do very great business. They had The Exorcist 3, did even worse business. Apparently quite a good film, I haven't seen it. They made a sequel that was meant to be a prequel that was so shit they fired the director, made a whole new version, it came out, didn't do well, critically or commercially, that a year later, actually less than a year later, they got the original director back to make his film with the footage he had, like a director's cut basically, and that was shit too and bombed. They did an Exorcist TV series, which was apparently pretty good, and it was cancelled after 2 seasons. So I have no idea where this arbitrary amount of money came from. I don't think it's a good idea in general. I'm glad they're not rebooting The Exorcist. That's the one positive I can take from this. And I'm not against the idea of a whole new Exorcist trilogy. I think if you have the right kind of execution here, it can work. David Gordon Green, though, when he made Halloween, and I loved his Halloween, and I'm so excited for the sequels, he made an entertaining popcorn slasher film. Because Halloween is a lot easier to bring to new audiences. I don't know how you do that with an Exorcist film without totally trashing and selling out the original film. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really interested in this idea. Of course, I'm going to see it because I'm a sucker. But it just seems like a terrible deal, number one. And also just not a very good idea. But either way, a whole new Exorcist trilogy. Oh, Jesus Christ. But anyway.